Hello and welcome to episode 71 of our Conversations to Connect. Let's Get Real podcast episode powered by Exceptional Connections. I'm Cyndi ONeill-Dady, the founder and chief connector of Exceptional Connections since 2009, 15 years. Wow. Our conversation to connect this week is with the inspiring Marlee Huber, joining us from Everett, Washington. Welcome, Marlee.
Thank you.
So I am very excited to be rolling up our sleeves today and discussing what if creativity is the first spiritual principle and we've made it the last. What a great topic, Marlee.
Well, it is kind of surprising. It kind of like, what? Because
Well, no, go ahead.
when you think of spiritual principles, we often think of meditation or devotional reading or even fasting, those kind of things. And we think, oh, those are so, right up there, top drawer. But what if creativity is really where we should be focusing? Because that's the closest to our identity and who we are.
Oh, what a beautiful little lead in to our conversation. So before we dive in, I want to take a moment to introduce Marlee to our listeners who may not be listening to this replay and may not know her. Share her passion for just really creativity and your tagline is the sneaky joy giver.
Joy giver, yeah.
Sneaky joy giver. So we'll get into that later too. Okay, so Marlee Blick Huber is a coach, speaker, and author. A once upon a time librarian. She has treasured her grandfather's words for a lifetime. Safeguarding old memories is what she does. Loved ones have begged for this story to be put into print, but preserving one's family legacy is not enough. Marlee's passion is to show how to uncover the silver cord of destiny revealed through your family's narrative. She helps you identify the treasure of your unique identity because your story is way too important to lose. I love that. With her husband, Clark, Marlee enjoys exploring backroads and capturing hidden beauty through the lens of her camera. She makes her home in the Pacific Northwest. And so welcome, Marlee.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Cyndi. It's a delight to be here. It was a delight to speak to the group on Tuesday.
Yes.
And now we get to jump in and talk a little bit more about creativity. So do you have a place you want me to start?
Well, I just love these conversations to connect because it gives us an opportunity to really dig deep and for you to really be able to have more than 20 minutes that we normally allow as a spotlight speaker and make it conversational. So I'm excited for this conversation. And, for those who attended, it's deep information, right? We were talking about that. This is stuff you really need to chew on. And so I'm excited for this to have the replay. So those who attended the event last Tuesday can have a chance to listen to it again and really get that extra explanation and hear it again so that it can really be a blessing to them. So before we jump in, I don't have a particular place. I'm going to just really kick it back to you to share with our listeners. I read the intro, but just a little bit more about your journey, maybe downtime hobbies before you jump into this topic. But let's make sure after that, you define creativity a little bit more.
Okay. Okay. Well, when I talk about this topic, I talk a lot about knowing your identity, knowing who you really are. And from the time I was a little girl, I loved gardens. Like you, Cyndi, I love gardens. I love to poke through them and explore and taste the succulent fruit that was in my auntie's garden and just notice all the flowers. I still have fond memories of an apple tree and the blossoms in the backyard of our home when I was in first grade. And I love to get lost in nature. It's an amazing place to be. And I think that really goes back to the heart of who I am as a person. And when I do identity coaching, what I discover often is we can get it down to maybe one word that really defines a person. And if that I were going to give you my word would be reflection. I reflect a lot, and a lot of times I do it verbally, and my daughters will say, Mom, you already told us that. But it's part of my process. And I've discovered in photography that I love to photograph reflections on water. Anytime I can get spectral light where light shines against one surface and then reflects back, it's the perfect place for a portrait. And so knowing my identity, knowing who I am, and it's so interesting because when I was my dad was a pastor. When I was about 3 years old, we lived in the basement of a church, and my mother would tell me, Marlee, you always would want to go in the Sunday school rooms, and you would write on the chalkboard, and you would teach Sunday school. So I think at heart, I'm a teacher. I'm reflective, and so the material that I'm going to share today came out of a lot of reflection, out of deep stillness. For years, I knew I should be still, but we all live in this world with so many distractions and so many, alerts and notifications are coming in, and it's hard to be still. And I always knew that's what I needed to do, was to draw into stillness, but it's a battle. It's a huge battle. So I guess that's a little bit about who I am, where I started. The material that I shared with the group, I call the hierarchy of goodness and evil. And it came about through sitting in a networking group, not a whole lot different than the one you have, Cyndi. Each week there was a psychologist. Each week he would say 95% of the population is motivated by fear and 5% by love. And one day he got in my face and he said, You're motivated by love. And I'm like, How do you know that? I don't even know that. But it sent me on a journey of discovery of what is love motivation? What is fear motivation? And what I came to realize that he was probably quite accurate. At one of the retreats I did, this woman challenged me. She said, I don't think 95% of the population is motivated by fear. And I had to think on my feet. And I said, well, there was a day when 100% of the people were motivated by fear. And she looked at me like, when was that? I said, after Adam and Eve fell and they ran away to cover themselves, they were it, and they were full of fear. So we have improved a bit.
And it started at the beginning.
Yeah, we started at the beginning. Yeah. So it really made me think, what is fear motivation? And why are we so motivated by fear? And the more that I had conversation and have observed, and I've spent probably thousands of hours studying out what I call radiant life mapping, which is putting love at the center. It's like a mind map where you put love right at the center, and then coming out from it, or how we push back. When we're pushed against, it's natural to push back. And so I began studying it and really discovered that there were 4 major fears that um, that we give room, we give space for. And, the first one would probably be fear of loss of control. We don't want to lose control. We always want to be able to feel like I'm in control. We were on a mountain recently, and there was a young couple we were talking with. And when it was time to go, she got in behind the steering wheel. And I said to her, I said, Are you like our daughter who always wants to, when on these mountain roads, when there's a drop off of a few hundred feet, you want to be in charge? You want to be in control? She said, Yep, that's why I'm driving.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that fear of loss of control. We don't want to lose control.
Mhm.
And so the opposite of that is when we feel safe, it's like I don't have to push back. I don't have to try to get control. So that one has to do with our willpower. I will be in control, or I will relax. I mean, it's a choice that we have to make.
Mhm. Yes.
When we talk about love and the heart tends to fear taking responsibility, because if I take responsibility, I might fail. And if I fail, my shame would be exposed. And none of us, because we all know none of us are perfect. We all have our Adam and Eve moment. And so we tend to step back when there's an offer to, do you want to be responsible? Oh, no, I don't want to be responsible because I could fail, because shame would be exposed. So that's that fear that has to do with the heart. When we talk about the soul, which is the expressive part of us, how we emote, how we win friends over, how we influence people, that is huge in our society right now. And that is fear of rejection. It is so very big. And with all social media and celebrities, we look at celebrities and go, wow, they've achieved, and who am I? Who am I? And so we don't want to be rejected. That's a really painful thing. And that's the fear that has to do with the soul. The fear that has to do with the mind is fear of the future. And we all know how that mind goes round and round and round, worrying. I've read some statistics that say somewhere between 88 and 93% of all of our thoughts are negative recurring thoughts. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And we think these over and over, and they're the kind of thoughts that hit you in the middle of the night when you wake up. What is that thought that, and maybe for years, it's that recurring thought. So the mind gets caught up in fear of the future. So those four fears, if we had the love in the middle, and then we drew lines out at each end, are those four fears. So fear, what does fear do? It immobilizes us. It freezes us. It takes away, it makes us judgy. We want to judge another. It's what I call the closed fist. Like when you're in a sales transaction and you're asking for the sale, and the person, you can just feel they've got the closed fist. Perhaps it's because they're confused, because we know confused people don't buy. They
Yeah.
just,
Confused mind says no, right?
if I'm confused, I'm like, okay, I'm not buying. So
Mhm.
it immobilizes us, it freezes us
Mhm.
down. All those four fears kick in. Am I going to lose control if I make this buying transaction? Am I, oh, I don't know. Will I get in trouble with my spouse, with my partner, with my, whoever, because I
Sure.
made this decision to do this? Uh, and then that fear of the future, is this the right thing going forward? And what if I make, oh my goodness, what if I make the wrong decision and someone rejects me? So all of those kind of fears are fears that can go around during the buying process, during that, and that person just, it's the closed fist. It's like, no, I don't want to do anything today. I remember when I first was invited to join the networking company, the skincare company that I've been with for 40 years next year.
Wow.
She looked at me and she said, do you want to buy it or sell it? And I looked back and said, I don't want to do either. Because what was going through my mind was, I knew the balance in the checkbook. And I decided I'd rather eat that week than buy skincare, even if it was a business. That's what went through my mind.
Mhm.
She had no idea that's why I said no to both offers,
Mhm.
because of checkbook balance.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. It was like, I think we'll eat.
Yeah.
I think we'll eat. So we don't know why people react in fear, but they do. And the way to counter that is, with my little chart here, if you can see it, is to go above the
So
line
so
with
the topic of this of that chart, the top of it, it says the hierarchy of goodness and evil. Because yeah,
there we go.
see it now. There you go.
This
I
is
just want to make
tricky.
sure everybody was able
It's
to
tricky.
see.
I could have shared my screen if I had everything ready, but I didn't.
That's
But
okay.
so love is the opposite. Love is the open palm. And it's interesting, Cyndi, at your events, so often I've seen you stand before the group, spread your arms out, and extend your palms. And I'm like, that is a love expression. That's a welcoming. You're all welcomed here. You're all valuable to me. And where fear judges performance, love honors the personage. And I think that's just the bottom line.
Wow. You know what I just thought of when you said that is, you know how people sometimes point at people?
Mm,
You've got a closed fist,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're not like, hey, it's like,
yeah,
in with the pointing, you've
yeah.
got a closed fist. So
You do.
there's a holding back, there's a
Yeah,
control, and then
yeah,
we all know the saying about when you point to somebody, it's like, you're pointing one finger and
yeah. Three are pointing back.
three are pointing
Yeah.
back, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, I spent probably 10 years in Toastmasters, and that's one thing I learned. This does not look good, but this
no, yeah,
is much more
right.
when you have the open hand, you point, you direct, you open up. So it's really about opening up and giving, jumping in, honoring. As I've been watching what's happening in North Carolina, oh my goodness, the stories are amazing. After this hurricane, of people jumping in, they're driving and they're bringing supplies, and it's a truly beautiful thing in our world to see people honoring others and jumping in and saying, I'll drive over there, I'll give you an ATV, I'll bring a truckload of food. It's a beautiful, beautiful expression of really who we are as a people.
Mhm.
We've had a lot of division in our land, but wow, this has been an expression of love that is just beautiful to behold.
You
Um,
know, Marlee, there are a lot of conversations to have in this world, right?
yeah,
There's a lot of things to talk about, there's a lot of different discussions, but this is such a beautiful conversation. And it's really at the heart of all humanity,
yes,
to be able to, because I'm looking at your chart here and the upper part that you showed is, 5% are motivated by
I love.
love and
Yeah.
95% by fear. So this is such an important
Well,
conversation for all of us to really reflect on.
did you go away or did I? Oh dear.
We added a person, so I
Can you,
think
can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay, I can't see anything. I just see this, the word Zoom.
I can see you fine.
Okay, well then I won't worry about.
Just, yeah, maybe it'll catch up here. I don't know what
Yeah, I
happened.
don't know. So, that's interesting, Cyndi, and I don't know if or the audience is familiar with the term of the 7 mountains of culture, but there are 7 distinctive mountains of culture, and I'll just list them off: arts and entertainment, business, education, family, government, media, religion. And what's interesting is, as I thought about all 7 of them, they all use fear motivation. Let me give you an example. Our daughter was in high school, and her English teacher would go off and say, "Wow, if you kids don't do yada 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 yada, you're never going to get in college. You're going to be a failure in life." She was using fear motivation to try to get them to do their homework. Well, my daughter was very sensitive, and she would come and she would, Mom, if I don't do this, I'm going to fail. I'm like, honey, she wasn't talking to you. She
Mhm.
wasn't talking with you. And she was talking to those who aren't doing their homework. But fear motivation is huge. And so we see it in government. Oh, if this person get elected or this person get, everything's going to fall apart. We see it in the media. What do they lead with? Stories that fear. I had a conversation with Dr. K, who's an anesthesiologist, and she's on a mission to remove fear from medicine, because my daughter was told once by a doctor, you could die tomorrow. well, she's had all these tests, and they go, oh no, that's totally, but they use fear motivation to try to get you to take the pharmaceuticals. So we can see in these 7 mountains of culture how often fear is the driver. So how do we counteract that? If we get into fear, then we are immobilized. And the more we recede into that, the more we isolate. I mentioned when I spoke about the movie Enchanted April, and I went and watched it again. Cyndi, we need to have a time when we get some people together and watch it, because I
I
realized
love that.
uh, the 4 main characters in the movie, they start out in isolated positions. They're isolating, they're in darkness, there is rainy London, and life is withering. But because of how they go away to this castle and what happens, they all step into the light. By the end of the movie, the group is bigger, the love, the growth. It's an amazingly beautiful movie. It's very slow moving, gives you time to really process. But that's what happens with us when we allow ourselves to be overrun by fear. And then we begin to isolate. So one of the questionnaires, one of the questions or one of the asks was, and I don't know who did this because she never signed her name, but it was, she wanted me to be more specific about creativity, like be more specific. And so I realized that maybe I didn't clarify as much as I should have. When we know our identity, we know who we are. And as you and I, Cyndi, have talked about, we get lost. Like you get lost in your garden and 4, 5, 6 hours goes by and you're like, what? It can't be 4 o'clock. I get lost out with my camera and it's like, what? I've shot 500 frames.
Yeah.
When we get lost in that, which is so close to who we are and how we're formed, flow happens. It's just the flow happens, and the flow brings us into the light. And that's what I have second. And you can hold that chart up because I don't think Dara has seen it. It'd be this one.
Oh, that one again?
That one.
Okay.
Yeah, so she can see the hierarchy. But when we operate from our identity, we flow with creativity. It accelerates growth. It's amazing. It's just like, whoa. And so what is creativity? It's different for everyone. It's however you're put together is how you're going to flow. So I recall doing some identity coaching with a woman many years ago. And the reason I remember is because we could bring it down to one word. This woman was all about restoration. Everything she did was about restoration. She had taught inmates in a penal institution. She would buy old houses that people would say, oh, that one's too far gone. And she would restore them. She was meticulous about sorting her cans and her papers and everything for recycling. And I pointed out to her, I said, everything that you do is about restoration. You are about restoring. And she had not realized that about herself. But so her creativity came out. When she saw a throwaway item, she saw a way to restore it. And that was her way of creativity. So creativity is so different for every single person. At the top of the chart, I have the word goodness and endorsement. And goodness is a verbal expression. And we think about, in the beginning, God created, and he said, let there be light. And then what did he say? It's good. It's good. So from creativity, we begin to make declarations. Declaration is win, win, win. I recently met a life coach, and she said, I'm not about win, win. I'm about win, win, win. And that's goodness. That's endorsement. When we We develop our creativity. We take it to a new height, either through, maybe it's through education, maybe it's just time spent. In photography, people will say, well, get your camera out and just experiment, try, make lots of frames. When I started and I wanted to learn about photography, I took an online course first, so then I could take my camera off of auto and use all the little buttons. The next thing I did was I went to the library and I checked out stacks, I mean, literally stacks of books by well-known photographers. And I read them and I extracted from them what I needed to know. So when I mentioned that on Facebook, this one man said, "Who are you? Are you a professional photographer? Who are you? Your photos are just not, you know," and he was going on and on. And he was acknowledging that I'd done my due diligence. So that's the other part of creativity. It's not being in isolation. It's learning from others. And I know, Cyndi, with your garden, the technique you use, you didn't make it up. You didn't reinvent the wheel. You learned from those had come before on how to do the kind of gardening that you do. So it all becomes win, win, win. And suddenly we're declaring over one another, wow, you know, you're world class. This is a world class garden that you have. This is, and that is, I love what Teresa of Avila said, I think it was back in the 1300s, and I have it here, all is well and all shall be well. It's this declaration of, wow, it's a beautiful day. I was recently came out of a store and you know, was following this hurricane, and this lady and I looked at each other and we said, "Oh, what a beautiful day!" And she said, "Yes, I have so much to be grateful for. I had a bed to sleep in last night. You know, I had coffee to drink this morning, or whatever. And we're yes, a roof over our head." And we began flowing with gratitude, because sometimes we're looking for the big thing to make us happy or fill us with joy. Sometimes, in light of what we've recently seen, it's that you had a pillow. You had your own pillow. You had your own blanket. You were in your own house. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. So that's
Can I just interject for a moment? I just wanted to, put to highlight what you're doing here and how you're, just demonstrating creativity and how it flows, and also how it goes into other, gratitude is such it's one of the highest spiritual principles, right?
yeah,
And to have a grateful heart and to even be grateful for small things, not just, you know,
right.
I'm I'm financially wealthy or I'm in good health, but just, like the little things, like you said, having your own pillow, being able to have your own bed, being able to be
Yeah,
warm, have food, So to have that gratitude, and when the more we're grateful, the more our heart grows
exactly.
grows that muscle, right?
I think that's where that 5% will grow as we come into gratitude. And the interesting thing was, when I spoke, I talked about when you're one of the 5% who live above the line, how do you bring people up with you? How do you bring them up there? And it's by honoring their identity, by pulling out who they are, by endorsing them. I was thinking, I read something the other day about letters, and letters are a lost art. And I'm
Mm.
thinking about when my grandson's 15 now, but I think he was about 12. I didn't handwrite it, but I typed a letter to him. Basically, it was an endorsement. It was telling who he was, who I saw him as being. And I tugged and pulled on all that I knew about him. Well, I put in the mail and mailed it to him, because how often do we get letters, and I don't know if I heard a response from him then or not, but a couple years later, I was in his room and he was showing me how he'd cleaned out his desk and everything. And then he pulled out the bottom drawer. He said, "I cleaned out the bottom drawer." He says, "There's only one thing in the drawer. It's the letter you sent me."
Wow.
It's like, oh, Because
That's
how do we
beautiful.
tug? How do we tug? How do we bring people above the line? How do we help them know their identity and their creativity? Is we use words and we begin to tug and to pull that out. And if they're living down, and that's exactly what happens in the movie Enchanted April. There's a gal and she's a visionary and she sees possibility. She sees love. She sees all these beautiful things. And pretty soon everyone is joining her. They're not living in fear. They're not living in isolation. They've opened up their hearts and they're loving one another.
That's so beautiful.
So
That's so beautiful.
any places we should go?
Well, yeah, I think, you and I had a conversation before we recorded, and in the context of creativity, you touched on it, but I'd like to just jump in because I think this is such a beautiful topic of, okay, so that's how we can identify our areas of creativity and our giftings, right? When we lose all sense of time.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that. Like, what's really going on when we lose our sense of time? Not only are we identifying that gift, right? And that thing that really has us suspend time, if you will, and have it just really be in the flow.
Okay. Interestingly, there's a lot of science that's coming out on this, which is, it only validates this whole concept. Our normal way of thinking is beta waves, and it's busy, it's notifications, it's this, that, and the other. It's lots of noise, lots of music. I don't know, find me a contractor who can't build a house or who can build a house without having music. Because when the contractor's working next door, the music is going because so those are beta waves and they keep us hopping but when we can slow down and we can get quiet, we can get into meditation and breathing deeply and just letting go, getting I like that heart-mind coherence concept of our heart is open and our mind just kind of sinks in there. We can get into alpha, beta, and theta waves. And these are where creativity flows. It's that bright idea that just lands on your mind and because you've made space for it. So I'll share with you a story. How many of us have been confused or like, okay, I need help from my child. They may be 30 years old, but you know that they've got an ache in their heart. There's some hopelessness. And that's how it was for my younger daughter. She wanted to be married and there was no guy on the scene. And so I remember one January going into my bathroom. I have a fairly large bathroom and I had a wicker chair in there. I set my timer for 30 minutes and I said, okay, God, I'm going to listen for 30 minutes. I need some answers from my sweet girl. And so what I did, and I'd never done anything like this before, I have to say I cleared the plate of my mind and I sat there in silence, just focusing on listening, creating, if you will, a landing pad for inspiration, revelation, insight. And I sat there for 30 minutes, and every time a thought would try to come, I know we're not doing that. That little puppy can go away. The little puppy always wants attention. Nope, puppy, you're out of here. And I sat there for 30 minutes in silence. And that's really where creativity grows, is in silence. And at the end of 30 minutes, the timer went off and I had heard nothing. I got up, I walked out the door, and literally in my spirit, I heard, she needs to know that he is coming. And I'm like, what? Where did that come from? But it was 30 minutes of sitting there in silence. And I had a request, and I think that's important that we have a request. What is your request? Don't just sit there but have a request. And I had a specific request. I need hope for my girl.
Yes.
And that's what I heard. Later in the afternoon, I paused. I thought, okay, I've heard when you get inspiration like this, it's a good idea to take it for a walk. You take it for a walk, you get out in nature. There's something about the color green and inspiration and getting out in nature. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this concept for a walk. And I'm standing at my kitchen island, and I thought, now what was that again? She needs to know that he is coming. And I got still. And instantly I heard the corresponding piece. He needs to know she is waiting.
Oh my goodness. That is amazing.
It was amazing, Cyndi. It was totally amazing. And I took the two thoughts for a walk.
Yes.
And I knew that I had to be very delicate. I mostly had to carry it for her. Because she was in a lot of fear and probably isolating a bit. Life was withering a little bit because she was, this particular age, and she had no hope. She wasn't where she wanted to be. And so I took it for a walk, and I very delicately shared it with her, but mostly I held it in my heart. And it was interesting because after they met, actually, after they were married, I said to her, I said to him, because sometimes I would pray, I'd go, Jesus, would you tell him that she's waiting? Could you just get the message? Because I don't know who he is. I don't know where he is. Did you get the message to him? Well, after they were married one day, I said, Michael, did Jesus ever tell you she was waiting? Oh, yeah, he said. He said, yeah. He would tell me. I would hear that. My pastor would tell me, she's waiting for you, Michael.
Oh my goodness. That's such a beautiful example of intercession. You were interceding for your daughter on behalf of your daughter and Michael.
Yeah, I was.
You were standing in the gap for them.
But where did it start?
In stillness.
In stillness.
Yes.
And that's what we do not realize. It was interesting because when I gave the presentation, that's what Marcel noticed. She said, wow, creativity comes out of stillness, which made sense to her because of some health issues and how she had to be still and what she could achieve during that time. But it is in deep stillness. It's in the wilderness, the desert experience, where there's nothing else but the opportunity to be still, and when to be still and know. And that's we say it as a Bible verse, be still and know that I am God. But we can shorten it to just be still and know. What do you need to know? That day I needed to know, I just needed help for Anne Marie. I needed something for her to give her hope. I needed hope. So that be still and know. And, so what is creativity? It comes out of what is my need, who I am, how I create, and what's going to flow. So when I shared that, Einstein got the theory of relativity, that was his field. He didn't get a download of Handel's Messiah. Handel got that. And so our creativity, so when people say to a child, oh, you can be anything you want to be, you can do anything well, it's true and it's not true. You can be anything you are designed to be.
That's right. Your giftings.
Your gifting, but you can't be
your purpose.
Yes. And so it depends on your identity.
A verse that comes to mind that seems to put a bow around this conversation from the fear piece, because when you're in fear, you're anxious, right? Yeah. And what does God tell us in, Philippians 4:6-7 is be anxious for nothing. And that was always, my son, I have a son that just likes to fester on all kinds of stuff. And so, I had him commit that to memory. Be anxious for nothing, but everything in prayer and supplication, request, right? Just like you said, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God, which defies all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Yeah. So that beautiful Philippians 4:6-7 really kind of puts a bow around a lot of things we've talked about in terms of, you know, we're to not be in fear.
Yeah.
We're to make our request known to God, through prayer, which is stillness,
Mhm.
deep stillness.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just was thinking about that while you're sharing.
Yeah. It's resistance against those, the negativity, the fear that is put out by all those parts of culture
Yes.
that would have us be motivated by fear. So one day where I'm with my daughter at the walk-in clinic, and she's sharing about how this doctor said you could die tomorrow. And the nurse,
What?
yeah, that's what, yeah, your cholesterol is this, you could die tomorrow. And so for a couple of years, every morning she woke up, I could die tomorrow, I could die tomorrow, because of the fear motivation. Well, that day she started having panic attacks, and that particular day in the ER, the nurse said, that's how they operate over there. And he pointed over there, in primary care. That's how they get people on the medication. They use fear.
Here. Mm. Wow.
She's had
And
a lot of tests, and the tests confirm no, she's not going to die tomorrow.
well, and that breaks my heart because think of how many doctors, give death sentences to people.
Exactly.
And they
Exactly.
say you have 2 weeks to live, and in 2 weeks they die.
Yeah.
And I suspect, those doctors don't have a crystal ball. They really don't know. They're
No,
guesstimating. But the
they're
thing is, it's the power of the mind.
It's the power of what happens and the fear motivation. You have to do this or else. And
Yeah.
that's where we feel like we lose control. It's the fear of loss of control, because suddenly they've said your life is out of your hands and you could die within this period of time. And so what do? You go down further. And at the bottom of that chart is death. Because we regress, we go down. Well, there's no hope for me.
Yeah, let's put it up again here. So fear, which is confusion, darkness, isolation, evil, chaos.
And
Yeah,
then darkness, and then evil. And evil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. John 10:10.
right.
Life is at the top. So yeah,
So you talk about ice. Tell us about ice.
well, ICE is know your identity, flow in your creativity, and the endorsement piece, which is, we give compliments. You'll get a compliment on, like, I use myself. I get a compliment on Facebook. What does it mean? It's a picture of a sunset. It just means I was at the right place at the right time with my camera aimed in the right direction. It doesn't say anything about me, particularly. I just happened to be there. Um, and that's a compliment. But the next level is acknowledgement. Just like I mentioned, someone observes, wow, you put some effort into this. I mean, I look at you, Cyndi, and I go, wow, what you have developed with your exceptional connection community is extraordinary. You've put a lot of thought into this. This is not just any networking group where we just go grab leads and leave. But this is a deep, it's like you're gardening. It's deep. You go deep in the earth, and that's what you're taking us into. And then endorsement, excuse me. Endorsement is where someone says, this is who you are. So in my book, my grandfather gave my father an endorsement. It was not to my grandfather's benefit, because my grandfather had one son. He dreamed about that son taking over the farm. He and grandma would move to the little house. My dad and his family would be in the big house. Grandpa would putter, keep the machinery going, and my dad would run the farm. But that all changed when my dad felt the call to be in ministry. I cannot take over the farm. He said it was the toughest thing he ever did in his life to have to tell his father, because they dreamed together. I can't do this. Now, his father could have lashed out and said, But son, if you don't, you're my only son. He could have put a guilt trip on him. He could have put fear on him. He could have said, oh, but you're a country boy, you'll never make, he could have done, he could have done that. But no, he didn't. He endorsed his life. He said, son, everything I do will return to dust, but what you do will live eternally. So I've been back to this
Wow,
farm.
that's wise.
It was incredible.
Mm,
I have been back to this old plot of land with these old buildings that are decaying and they're turning to dust. I've been there twice. And both
mm,
times I've thought, wow, my grandfather was absolutely right.
mhm,
Everything he built is returning to dust. But then I would pause and I would realize, no, what he really built was a family. And
yes.
now it's 125 years later, and we're recalling the memory of this man who had an amazing transformation, instantly built a relationship with Jesus Christ, and was delivered from alcohol. Never touched it. Never, I mean, he would get sick if he even smelled alcohol.
Mm,
And he built a life. So he was absolutely right, but absolutely wrong. But he could have put a fear and guilt trip on my dad, but he didn't. He endorsed my dad. He spoke goodness. And in hard times, I could recall my dad's mind going back to that farm and thinking it could have all been mine.
mm,
That's the power of endorsement. Endorsement will carry someone through the hard times because it goes to the core of who they are and what their call, what their identity is, what their creativity is, how that flows. That's what an endorsement is.
So your grandfather, he built a life for your family, a legacy, right? He
Like,
built a future.
yeah.
And he did that with what came to mind for me as you're sharing that beautiful story is he set his ego aside.
Oh, yeah.
So the
Absolutely.
ego would have brought in the fear and the,
Yeah.
the anger and the,
Exactly.
all of that that would have made it
Yeah.
harder for your dad. He may still have led the same path, but it would have affected their relationship. It would have affected the family. Um, I love those three concepts. I think they're so beautiful. And can we go back to identity for a minute? Because I remember when you and I talked about this, that's the piece that we've been weaving through this conversation today.
Yeah.
It's really what your gift is, what your purpose is in life, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
what God instilled in you at the time of inception, right?
Yeah.
So identity is critical in this, especially in this generation, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And then creativity. So I'm reviewing for my benefit and for the benefit of those who are listening, because I want to go someplace with this. So creativity is, you've said you're uniquely designed. And you've said this to me personally, and it's just always been like, oh, that's like the most beautiful compliment I've ever received, is you've said to me and to different people in our community, you are world class. What a beautiful
Yeah.
compliment to give people. Not you're just
Well, I have received that. Yeah. I have received that twice on two different occasions. The first time it was really hard for me to hear. I'm like, no, I don't think so. The second time it's like, oh, okay. Because I knew both of these individuals who gave it, I would say they're world-class listeners to God.
mm,
They know how to get still. And that's what we need. We need to be I think that was heaven's words for me. And they
mhm.
heard him and they translated it to me. And I think that's part of the beauty of being still is listening and being able to help others see, yeah, you're world class. Because we're all here. I mean, if you do the science of how how we're formed in conception, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, most of the the creative process, most of the little critters go away and there's one sperm and one egg and that becomes you and me. And it's amazing. And the fact that we live and how we're um, uniquely designed. I was reading something the other day and it was, well, I've thought about color And my friend Dara here, she dyes fabrics and makes beautiful banners and things. And I mean, you start out with 7 basic colors. With music, all music, there's 7 notes in the chord or in the, yeah, don't get me in too technical here, but there's 12 notes. There's 7 for each the pentatonic. Am I saying that right? Yeah, chord. And then I read that there are 4 basic minerals that all life is made from. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and what's the 4th? Can't think about it right now. But there's 4. And you think about all the variety. We have elephants that are huge and tiny little fillies that can jump amazing. We have all this different life, and basically it comes out of these simple building blocks. So it means that who we are as individuals is so much more than just the chemicals or the 7 notes in the piano or the 7 colors in the rainbow. There's something infused in each one of us that makes us so highly unique that we really are world class. And what our world needs, what our young people need to know is that they are here, they have a call to be here, they have a purpose, they have a charge. Your charge, this is the charge I give you to go out and do something. And you apply yourself, you'll become world class. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to be a celebrity, because some of us are in very quiet places, but we shine in those quiet places. But I don't know, just
No, well, you went exactly where I was going to go with this, is how can we encourage the next generation? Because it feels to me, and not every Gen X, but it feels to me this generation, the youngest generation here coming up, that they're lost in general. And I know there's some that because of their foundation, because of their family, because of their home, they're fine, but the work ethic in our community, in our world, especially since COVID, a sense of grit and resilience, it doesn't seem to be there in our culture right now as prevalent. And so I think your message of identity, creativity, and endorsement is so important, to encourage the younger generation, and to those of us who are, the white hairs, who can, we've had our time in the sun. We've raised our family. We've been through those beautiful and hard times. We have grandchildren in many cases. We've had our careers, and now we're, living our passion. But for those who are, kind of just starting their journey, or just starting their family, or, they need that encouragement, because the culture doesn't support that, I don't believe.
We need to move past the celebrity culture.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Because that's what pulls people down into this isolation, darkness, and I'm not worthy. And the world would be better off if I weren't on this planet, because they don't see a purpose, because we have made idols of celebrities, sports, musicians, actors. And because of that, it's down there in the bottom, judging performance. Well, my performance sucks,
Because they're comparing themselves to something that they can't attain, like the Taylor Swift or whatever, they see that as their role model, which, I'm praying we can get to a day where teachers are esteemed, like, like the celebrities, like the athletes, we can get to that time, that sense of what's valuable.
And that, that opens up a whole other topic, which is the difference between the Hebrew and the Greek mindset. And the Greek mindset is, I know what the teacher knows, but the Hebrew mindset is, I have become the teacher. It's the process of becoming and knowing the teacher, and it's a difference.
When you say that, I love that, because when you're saying that, I'm thinking of, that's what came to mind for me, my knee jerk here was, education, to value and esteem education. But it's not just that, it's wisdom, really.
Yeah.
It's really a difference between something that's more superficial and a deeper, sense of wisdom, and being able to convey that wisdom, like, what you, in your book, a life, a life of resounding joy, your baby here,
Yeah.
so I think this is a good transition point here as we wrap up, to talk about your, as I mentioned at the very beginning, you're an author, you're a speaker, and in June we had a launch party, and we
Yes.
celebrated.
Yeah.
We celebrated your book coming to life and being able to share with others. So tell us a little bit about, the inspiration for this book, because I think that we would be remiss in ending this conversation if we didn't really share, like, where this book came from, and your passion and heart for being able to be obedient in getting this book out into the world.
When your grandfather passes away before your second birthday, how much do you really know about him? And I said, I'm sitting out to write about my grandfather. But as I wrote, and I did go through, I have to say, in 2012, my husband wanted to bicycle across the country. So 90 days away, it was a clean cut. And here we are on the road going like 50 miles a day across the country. Lots of stillness. And it was like, it shut me down in terms of, okay, you're not going to be running here, there, and everywhere. Because I had one duty, and that was to get the truck and the trailer to the next campground, be sure that my bicyclist had food and water and that kind of thing. That was my focus. So during the hours when he was biking, I was taking pictures or taking walks, whatever like that. Lots of stillness. When I came home after that 90 days away, I felt very strongly that I was supposed to pull back from all the activities I was involved with and experience more stillness. And I have to say, I have friends that weren't happy with me, but I removed myself from a lot of things. And it was about 6 years. And actually, Cyndi, yours was probably the only group that I really came to and belong. But I wasn't really belonging to your group in that I was just doing the photos. So I was kind of separate in a way. But for about 6 years, it was a lot of stillness. So when I was processing this book and writing it, I realized so much of this book is not just about my grandfather, but it was about my father and his influence on me. And it came out of deep stillness. So I was sharing it with a life coach recently, and she asked me to read 3 paragraphs from the introduction out loud to her. And when I did, she was speechless. She got very still, almost welled up in tears. And she's like, wow. Finally, she was able to express herself. And she said, I feel like you took me on a journey. I feel like I'm home. I feel like, and I realized that this book is not just my grandfather, but it's his influence on my father. And my father was a profound influence on me. And he always pulled me, always tugged me into a deeper relationship with God, into a deeper faith. And it was a place where he tugged me, was a place that was not public. It was very personal, very deep, very intimate. So this coach, when I shared that with her, she said, this book is an immersion experience. And so it's about, in the process of reading it, it's about going deep and being still and learning to listen. And that's why there's a lot of description in there. I've had people say, wow, I know exactly what your grandparents' house looked like because of the way you described it. But I wanted people to experience it at a deep level, because that's what's going to take us out of this beta wave, this, ding, 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 ding sort of notification, into alpha and gamma and theta, so that we can have these experiences that draw us higher and draw us deeper. And out of that, creativity is going to flow. This book is so beyond anything that I ever dreamed it would be. And sometimes I read it and I'm going, wow, who wrote this? Who wrote
Mm.
this book? Because that's what it is. It's kind of a workshop in learning to be still. Prairie life, living on the prairie, there was a lot of stillness in that wide open space that we don't get when we're in the cacophony of where we live, with everything grows, there's trees every which way, and you go through a forest and there's down trees, up trees. You can't get a minimalist picture in a forest,
Right.
but you can on a prairie. You can get a lone tree.
Right.
And that's what we're going for. We're not going for all the clutter. We've got to get rid of the clutter. We need the deep stillness in order to press into our mandate of who we are. And that's what I hope to do with this book.
So what I've heard, in just different times when you talked about this book and the making of this book over 50 years,
Yeah.
um, which is a long time. I
Yeah.
mean, and I've been your friend and witness when you've had hard times, and you
It
were
wasn't easy. It
the
wasn't
words weren't coming. The words weren't coming. You were like, I don't
easy.
feel inspired here. But we can say now, because you have your book, you were a vessel that God used. And I've heard you talk about this, and I have a sense of that in reading it myself. You allowed yourself to be a vessel, the inspiration to come, and you being obedient to be able to put it down in pen, right? Put it down and for posterity, put it down to be a contribution to others. And from that, from your calling, from all the years of being a storyteller, of being a photographer and being observant, you have a beautiful eye for beauty and for having that object, whether it be a flower or the sun, transcend from its physical being to its essence.
Yes.
And that's your gift. I think when you talk about, when people say, are you a professional photographer? And where were you trained? And how long have you been doing this? And they're like, they can't believe that you've honed these skills so quickly. But that's part of your gifting. That's part of your, the vision I believe God's given you to see beyond, to transcend the natural, whether it be with a natural object, flowers, trees, mountains, the sun, or people. Because I've seen you capture people and you're like, wow, you're capturing their essence, not just, their smile.
That's my goal. It's to see beyond to reality, because the physical is just the shell. Whether you're talking about a flower or a portrait of a person, but what is the essence of that? And when you think about 4 minerals making up all organic matter, but it's also different. It lets you know there is a God. There's reality beyond the physical.
And so you're talking about that shell being the soul, right? I mean, what's inside that shell is the
What's
soul.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so what just occurred to me is, you kind of began this conversation and set the tone when we talked about, people are 95% motivated by fear, 5% motivated by love, and how that was something you've been pondering for years. And really, is that true? And am I, and if it's true that others see me as love, what does that really mean? And just exploring that, and then identifying the 4 major fears: loss of control, heart, the soul, and the mind. I'm thinking about this now, just at the end of our conversation, how this can flip, because the opposite of loss of control is feeling safe, feeling loved,
And that's that other chart. That's that other little chart I have.
which we didn't get into really.
We didn't get into that one. But it's feeling safe. It's feeling I'm healthy. I'm happy. I'm at peace, or I'm at ease. And you can pick your own words. This is my chart. And as I said, you can pick what is the opposite for you. And as you begin to declare that, instead of, oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose control, it's when I step into what I call the tub of love, I'm safe. I'm healthy. I'm happy or merry or joyful, and I'm at peace. And we begin to declare that we declare who we are in that space of love, and we can do it over others. We can declare it over others the same way. And I understand, I haven't delved into it, but I understand there's science about that. When you begin to declare it over others, that literally there's a frequency that goes out and they will feel it.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Marlee. So you mentioned radiant life mapping. So tell our listeners how they can get your book, how they can connect with you, how they can learn more. What is the best way to?
My book is available at radiantlifemapping.com, and that's because it's a very personal book. And I shared a book with a friend yesterday who's going through a tough time, and I want to be able to have a high touch relationship with this book and with the people, the recipients of it. Radiant Life Mapping is a whole visual way of looking at the heart, soul, mind, and strength. How do we love with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and all our strength? There's kind of a poetic, if you go to the website, 1001 Words on Favor, that goes through the heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's on my website. I'm looking in the future to do some retreats, some more seminars. I've had people come into real freedom because a lot of times what we need is vocabulary. We know how we are, but we don't really have words to describe. And what Radiant Life Mapping does is give people vocabulary so that
Hmm.
they can move from fear to freedom. And I think I mentioned in some of the results people have had. I had a lady come just to one session one time. She walked in with her cane. It's kind of like Enchanted April. She walked in with her cane, and at the end, she said, "Look at, I'm walking without my cane." She said, "This explains so much. I got so much freedom today."
Hmm.
Um,
So freedom in the spiritual translates to freedom in the physical.
exactly. And in the soul, because
Hmm.
that's what I'm addressing is how do you love? I mean, we're told in scripture, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, all your soul. And it's like, well, what is that? And that's what I spent a lot of years studying. So I could identify, I could help you get language so you would know this is the soul and this is the fear that the soul is faced with. And this is how we begin to walk in love with soul expression, or this is the strength or the mind or the heart. So it's basically vocabulary.
It is. It is. It's being able to recontextualize things that we've heard in the past and also take it so that there's life in it.
And the other thing that it does, because it is a mind map, and if you've ever studied anything about mind maps, when you work from a mind map, it's easier to retain information and it's easier to add in new information. So once you begin to see the chart that I use, then amazing things just fall into place. You go, oh wow, okay, that explains. It's like the light really shines. The light really
Well,
shines.
it sounds like that's a conversation, a whole other conversation for another day. But Marlee, thank you so much for being on our conversation to connect today. Thank you for being a contribution to our Exceptional Connections community in so many ways, not only capturing the essence of our meetings and the joy as our photographer, but also as our spotlight speaker this month. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you. And I'm inspired by who you're being and the difference that you're making in the world by being obedient to what God's, the vessel that he's allowed you to be and be able to share that. Because I think the timing is, I believe couldn't be any more beautiful, because on the other side of what we're going through, I think family, faith, freedom, those are the things that they're going to be near and dear to Americans once again, and to be able to help us through these challenging times.
Exactly, exactly. It's kind of a deep topic, but I've tried to make it simple with visuals.
It is. So do get a hold of A Life of Resounding Joy. It's a beautiful book. Marlee is an amazing storyteller, and you just get drawn into it. It feels like she's having a personal conversation with you. It doesn't feel like you're reading a book. It really feels like you're getting to know Marlee, and she's letting you into her world and her family, and the hard times, the good times, the challenges, but also the inspiration and the insights. So thank you, Marlee. I just want to, kick it back to you for a moment to just share any parting words with our listeners. I know we've gone over more than we normally do, but this has been such a lovely conversation, and we've gone all over the place. But I'm hoping that it's a contribution and a blessing to all who are listening.
Well, Cyndi, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, trusting me to speak to your group, because it's not an easy topic um, to share or to receive. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. I really appreciate the opportunity to share there. I appreciate the opportunity to share here. This has been a lot of fun.
It has been. It's been lovely. So thank you so much. Wishing everyone, make every connection an exceptional connection. And thanks for joining us. Take care.
Bye-bye.